Hello, my name is Erica Donnison and I'm one of the Alexander Studies online team. This month, we're following up from last month's conversation with Anikó, who is in Melbourne, Australia. And we're joined by Julia Woodman, who is one of my colleagues on the ASO team and in the Stat Research group. Julia runs the Alexander Teaching Training School in Edinburgh. We thought we would explore something that Anikó said in the conversation we had last month around how the dentists that she now teaches found the Alexander technique challenging. And so that's the reason why Anikó started to develop the optimum dental posture product, if you like, the way that she now teaches and runs courses for dentists in the Alexander technique. Maybe it's best to start, Anikó, with what was it that you found was sort of not quite right about the way that the technique was taught, and what was it that the dentists that you know of who went for lessons found challenging about the way they were taught?
What I found was that in my first year of training, I realized that the way I was being taught was never going to work with dentists. And the reason why I came to that conclusion was that, first of all, I sent about 4 dentists to various Alexander teachers because I believed that they would be helped, that they were in pain. And these Alexander teachers were very experienced, and I met them and I thought they were great. And each dentist went for 1 lesson and then told me, somewhat angrily, that it was a complete waste of time. It's for the birds. It's airy-fairy and waffly. They could see no point in sitting and standing, and they saw no relevance whatsoever to their pain or dentistry. And at first I was actually annoyed with them. I thought, what is wrong with you lot? I mean, these were, terrific Alexander teachers, and you are in pain. And then I spent some months thinking about it and realized that although the training course was well recognized, it was unstructured, and the way that I was learning for myself and how to teach it, I thought was more suitable for the learning style of singers, dancers, musicians who were probably very comfortable. And I know there's a long track record of successfully teaching the performing arts world. However, the learning style of dentists requires more structuring, very clear explanations, a very confident approach. For example, the idea of giving an experience first doesn't work with them. They're not looking for an experience. They want to know how this could help. And most of them had been to many medical specialists and physical therapists, and they need to know why this is different. And also, they need a very confident approach. But I'm aware that many teachers, very good teachers, will work in a way where they'll say, well, let's try this and see what happens, or let's experiment with that. And with this group, it just doesn't work. It will sound like the teacher doesn't know what they're doing. A dentist expects a very clear way of teaching and also practical applications to their occupational chronic pain and dentistry.
I guess what I'm hearing you say is that there perhaps wasn't enough explanation as to why some of the activities that were being taught in the lessons were being done, or they weren't being applied to their situation.
Yes. The hands doing the talking will not work with dentists.
Unless it's explained as to what...
Unless it's explained really well. They need to have some theoretical understanding of what has been going on. For example, I like to talk about the fact that we have the body, or body-mind, has a a particular design and we need to know about it. It's like driving a car. You need to know the road rules and how to drive the car. And we tend to drive our bodies in the wrong gear. And it's not our fault. We never learned that there are some joints that are not designed for prolonged bending, and there are muscle groups that are not designed for prolonged contraction. So it's not rocket science, but it's really simple. And yet knowing that will make a difference. They need to know that what distinguishes, in my mind, our work is that we're actually dealing with the cause of the problem. We're not into just symptom relief. And all of that needs explanation. And starting with sit-stand, which each dentist had in their first and only lesson, didn't make sense to them. It wasn't explained. And I'm not critical of the teachers. My experience was that they're very good teachers. However, working with dentists requires a different way. And I thought I'll just read to you for interest. I came across a description of the typical dentist in a dental journal back in 2018, and it said, the dentist personality types are typically pragmatic and practical, logical and objective, and organized and decisive.
And probably the complete opposite of somebody in the performing arts. And so very different language to connect with them. Yeah.
Yes. And I feel that it's really important to connect the dots. So is relevant to promoting and marketing the Alexander technique, because unless we speak the language, it will just go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, I completely agree. We absolutely need to speak the language. So for me, it's not so much whether someone's a dentist or a musician or a surgeon or whatever. We need to be able to relate to them, to their life, to their way of seeing things, their way of understanding. So one size is never going to fit all. And I know with my own training, maybe I had a similar experience to Anikó in that I had a really good training, but I was kind of perplexed. I didn't really understand what it was all about. Took me a long time afterwards to work it out. And then I realized, and this really tells against me, but we used to do these daily games where some little simple activity, like, I don't know, going up onto tiptoe or reaching might be demonstrated. And I just didn't quite see the point of it all. But if only it had been framed as, right, the next time you're needing to reach up and get that thing off the shelf there, it would have made so much more sense.
Yes.
So you can say, oh, Julia, you're really stupid. Why didn't you connect all the dots? But that's just the way my brain works. So I jokingly decided that I wanted to open a training course one day for left-brained people. So actually, I have opened a training course. I think we have people of all types of brains who come. I know we do. But it certainly, the curriculum does have a structure. It is more structured. We do use the classical procedures. We use other everyday activities as well, but it's all structured around the principles. And I think the really important thing for me is that there's a lot of discussion so that we can share ideas, share concepts, so that each of us can build our own kind of understanding and our own kind of conceptual framework, rather than relying almost entirely on implicit learning through experience. Which I think for people like possibly all three of us here, we sort of get it a bit, but it would just be so much easier, if it was just made a little bit more practical and related to daily life.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because in my training we were reasonably practical and we did a lot of the procedures. Exploring, how the body works, and we did a lot of anatomy, and I enjoyed all of that. But yeah, being the sort of left brain person, I always wanted to understand why, what's going on, why are we doing this, why does that work, why. And I found that challenging. And so I guess, yeah, since I've started teaching, which was a while ago now, that's actually what I enjoy about it. It's sort of finding out about the person who we're working with, finding out, what their job is, what their interests are, and then finding the way to describe the work in a way that that person will hopefully be able to understand.
I was just saying, I agree. Makes it so much more interesting when you've got that interaction, constant interaction. You're learning from them and they're learning from you. And it's not just, right, I'm going to keep getting you in and out of a chair. But I do quite a bit of that as well, actually.
Well, yeah. I
But
mean, but that's the thing,
give
isn't
the
it? We're
framework.
working with the principles, and getting in and out of a chair is done for a reason. It shows up an awful lot of habits, and it is a really easy. I would say to my clients, we do an awful lot of standing up and sitting down, just basically because it's something you can do in a relatively small space, and it brings up lots of habitual responses. So I'll set the context for that before I even start, and then start to apply the work to whatever their interest is.
Yeah, and it's an everyday thing, but it's moving in balance, which is really what we
Exactly.
want. Whatever we're doing, we want to be in balance and keep regaining our balance. Getting out of a chair is relatable to everything in life where you're reaching or squatting or whatever, brushing your teeth.
Yeah. And certainly from the dentist's point of view, they are sitting, aren't they? And they're moving from, as you explained last month, their whole work is based around sitting, and then moving from that chair to do the work that they have to do. So it is relevant, but from what you were saying, Anikó, they didn't quite get that relevance, and that's what you're now teaching.
Yes, well, they also spend time standing and bend in ways that are harmful, just like in sitting. So I teach both how to stand. I teach the lunge around the dental chair, and that's amazingly helpful. Putting it in context, and I find for dentists, they need to understand connecting the dots, the application to dentistry, before they can do anything else. Sit stand is something that I bring in much later, because at first they're not looking to be in balance. So they are not looking for ease, freedom, balance. There's a whole lot of description that works really well for typical students, and certainly in the performing arts world. When it comes to dentists, for example, who have occupational chronic pain, anything that's promoted as ease and balance they will just flick right past it.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Because it is relevant.
It is relevant.
It just doesn't compute, doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't compute. They don't see that this will help. And just talking about training, like you mentioned, Julia, I had no idea what the work was really about. Even though I paid attention, I did a lot of reading, I had to go way outside my training course to understand, to really be conversant and have the practical understanding and confidence to teach. Perhaps everyone has to do that, but I was just yearning to know more. And whenever I was asking questions, I was very quickly told, look, stop talking, let's get hands-on.
I think that's the other thing. It's so important that when we're teaching, this is just my opinion, is that we're combining hands-on with congruent verbal dialogue explanations. And it's not just relying on the hands-on. Important as that is, and as useful as that is, I don't think it's sufficient, personally.
I remember that being the challenge, though. I remember when starting working with sort of real people who are coming in from the outside in my training school, actually finding the words was the most challenging part. Because you start spouting what you've learned, what you hear your teachers saying, but actually what we need to do is to find our own words in the first place, our own way of explaining, because we have to understand it for ourselves, don't we? And then it has to then come out in our own words, as opposed to just sort of parroting what your teachers
think that's why it's so important that, well, firstly, that we give people opportunity to work with lots of different members of the public while they're training. And they have the more opportunity they have of that, the more confidence they can get before they qualify.
So do you think the dental professionals who come to you would be interested to learn more about the research we have underpinning the Alexander technique? Would that be something that you would explain to them or send them links to?
Yes, yes. Very early on, I acknowledge that my work is based on the Alexander technique, or I call it the inner ergonomic principles of the Alexander technique, and I give quotations from research studies, and then I specify that this is evidence, cause-oriented and evidence-based, and I have course notes or workshop notes that I send at the end of a session or end of a workshop, because I don't want people to look at any notes. I want them to engage with me directly, and I send links to studies. It is important.
I think that's true. Working with any health professional, generally, I think they would want to know that there's some kind of research behind what we're doing. But I mean, I try and drop in research wherever it's appropriate. And lots of people, regardless of what profession they're in, what walk of life they come from, to know that there's some research and in so many different areas as well, can be really reassuring. It sort of gives a little bit more credibility, I think, to what we're doing. You know, I certainly don't give people long lectures on what the research is, but I will probably just drop into the conversation. Oh yeah, and there's research to back that up as well.
I've done that more, I think, when I work with people with Parkinson's, and I tend to say to them, because obviously they're looking for something that's going to help them, but they don't know anything about the technique generally. And so I will always mention that, this is something worth coming to, because we have this evidence base that shows that that learning the technique can be really helpful for if you're living with Parkinson's. And that seems to reassure them that they're not coming to some sort of, weird and wonderful, wacky thing, and that it might actually. And then, of course, it's very important with them to apply it to daily activities, because that's the things they're struggling with. So all of what we're talking about applies a lot when you're working with, well, certainly my cohort of people who are living with Parkinson's.
I hope I'm not sounding like I think this is the only way to teach. I suspect that the learning style of the performing arts world would not be met by the way I teach dentists. So I recognize that this is a way that works for dentists. However, this would not translate well into other fields. For example, when I went to a workshop with I was still a trainee, world-renowned Alexander teacher, wonderful, and we walked round and round the room, and she told us to notice the space and hear the sounds and this and that, and I thought, if any dentist came to this workshop, they'd be walking out the door and never come back. However, I think that if they came to my workshop, they might feel the same and walk out the door. The way I'm teaching is specifically useful for dentists. I'm a dentist, and I am teaching only the dental profession, the whole dental team, not just dentists, because there is such an alarming incidence of occupational chronic pain that I'm kept busy enough looking after my profession, and I'm passionate about helping my colleagues. I think that this approach would also be helpful to anyone in the health fields who also like very clear explanations and practical applications. However, I'm aware that a musician or a dancer or a singer might find this far too structured, and it would not meet their needs. So I am aware that this is just one way that is working in the area that I'm interested in teaching.
I'm sure every Alexander teacher is wanting to be effective for the individual in front of them, whoever that person is. And perhaps traditionally in some trainings there hasn't been a lot of emphasis on how you can practically adapt your teaching to make it relevant to people. So, I mean, it was something perhaps a lot of us have learned post-qualification is like how can we, for example, mock up, the client comes in, they tell you about some issue they've had, and you end up mocking up some replica of it so that you can show them how they could have applied or how they can apply the Alexander technique in that situation.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I remember in my training that one of the main teachers sort of said, oh yeah, the 3 years of training is just a start. And really we ought to have another 2 years at least of kind of how you start to apply it in the real world. And I think that, I mean, I'm 20 odd years on, I'm still learning, and that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
Yes. Going back to the traditional way, Julia, my understanding is that it's giving a person an experience first and aiming for some amazing, literally flying out of the chair experience, and then maybe a little bit of explanation, if any. And I'm aware from many different writings of Walter Carrington's students that he taught to distract the student from trying to figure out or ask questions, what's happening, or ask questions. And I have had lessons with teachers who had wonderful hands and they were tinkering with my body and talked about the weather. And so I think that may be one of the traditional approaches that I'm thinking of.
Right. But we can't actually give somebody an experience. So that's my issue with that kind of approach. It's like we can enable somebody to have an experience. And what are they going to make of that experience other than thinking, oh, that was nice? It's like, so, we can teach in kind of traditional ways in terms of we can use it, chair work or table work or whatever, along with other things. But it's how we frame it. It's so that people understand why we're doing what we're doing, and how, most importantly, so that they can then take it away and put it into practice. They can put that thinking into practice for themselves in their daily life. That otherwise we're not really teaching them the Alexander technique if they don't have those thinking skills.
Yes.
Yeah, and it is something, the technique is something that is to be applied in everything we do. It underpins everything we do. So if you only click into the thinking when you come into your lesson, which I've had a few people say, oh, I can do it when I'm in here, like,
Yes.
So that triggers for me, how do I help them to adapt to whatever stimuli they are facing in the outside world? Because the stimuli aren't there, the same stimuli aren't there in a lesson setup. We have a nice safe space, and people can really get into what we're working with, but go outside and stimuli hit you.
And I think for all of us, it's taken time then to kind of walk that delicate tightrope between, if you've got somebody who really would benefit from knowing more why, and understanding, and not just learning through experience, is we don't want them to then just be analysing all the time and trying to figure out how is this working, and like that. So, but that's all part of the joy of teaching people, is that together you're figuring out. Well, personally, I think most people want to have some understanding of why, and that not that many people really can. But I know there are definitely. I've come across people who just kind of get it implicitly through experience, and I think, wow, that's amazing. But I think most of us need some kind of framework to kind of hang it around.
Yes. 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 The framework is such a good word. That's so important.
Okay, well, I think that's a really good place to end this conversation. Please do drop any of us an email if you want to say something specific to any of the three of us. So all it remains for me to do is to thank both Anikó and Julia for joining me today. And yeah, it's been a really interesting and stimulating conversation. Thank you.